Alexandrite, the stone that changes its mind. It was first discovered in the 1830s in Russia's Ural Mountains, a region where miners were already used to digging up oddities. The initial stones were misidentified as emeralds. They were green, after all. Then someone lit a candle near one. The stone turned red. Later, in daylight, it turned green again. That's how the color change effect got its name, Alexandrite. Real Alexandrite is a chrysoberyl, a rare mineral with traces of chromium. The chromium sits in the crystal in a way that makes the stone absorb some wavelengths of light and reflect others, depending on the source. Under sunlight, it prefers green. Under candlelight or incandescent bulbs, it leans red. A woman in 19th century St. Petersburg once said that wearing an Alexandrite was like having two rings in one, a secret for her eyes alone. The stone would switch colors depending on the room, the time of day, the mood of the light. Alexandrite on the skin feels like a whisper, lighter than you expect, but it leaves a presence behind, a color that lingers in your peripheral vision. Alexandrite is the only gemstone that refuses to be defined.
Diamond. The thing you think of when you hear forever, the one that became the default in every engagement ring, started getting serious luxury attention around 1888 when Cecil Rhodes founded De Beers. That's over 100 years of branding leading straight into the 1947 slogan, "A diamond is forever," which basically turned a sparkling rock into a global emotional contract. Technically, it's carbon. Just carbon. Compressed for over 1 billion years, deep in the mantle, under pressure like a planetary vice. Most natural diamonds are ancient, primeval, older than oceans, older than trees. Here's the subversion. Diamonds are not rare. They're controlled. De Beers, at its peak, moved more than 80% of the world's supply and kept warehouses full of stones while carefully feeding the market just enough to make you feel scarcity. The conflict is human from the start. In the 1930s, the average American hadn't even considered a diamond ring mandatory for marriage. Then came the campaign, the slogans, the celebrity placements. The goal was simple: make this the only stone that matters in that moment. Texture-wise, a high-quality diamond is glass-like, but alive. Hard, cold, and almost liquid at the same time, catching light, fracturing it, bouncing it back in a way that feels like it's breathing. The weight of it on the finger isn't just grams. It's expectation. It's social proof. It's history folded into a single point of light. A diamond isn't a promise. It's the place where promises are made to live.
Emerald. The stone that Cleopatra claimed as her own. In 69 BCE, when she became Queen of Egypt, she didn't just wear emeralds. She seized all the mines under her control and turned them into a direct line of power. She gifted them to foreign dignitaries, carved them into seals, used them to say, "I am the one who owns the earth's green." An emerald is a variety of beryl, colored by chromium and sometimes vanadium. What makes it different from many other gems is that it almost always has internal fractures and inclusions, tiny cracks, pockets of fluid, microscopic rivers trapped inside. The slightly warmer, the reveal. The trade calls this pattern a jardin, a garden. That's the surprise. What most people think of as flaws are actually the stone's signature. A completely clean emerald is almost suspicious. The real beauty is in the tangle, in the little chaos, because that's what makes it feel alive. In the 1500s, emerald miners in Colombia were paid not in gold, but in emeralds themselves. They'd walk out of the mines carrying stones in their hands, in their pockets, stitched into their clothes, walking through the forest with treasure they couldn't even sell at fair price. Holding an emerald feels like holding a piece of moss that never dried. Cold, dense, but somehow organic. There's a thickness to its green, like staring through a window into a deeper world. Emeralds don't sparkle, they absorb. They are the only stone that feels like it's listening back.
Painite, the stone that lives in the margins of catalogs and museums. It was first discovered in the 1950s in Mogok, Myanmar, by a British gemologist named Arthur C.D. Payne, who initially thought he'd found a ruby. Years later, analysis revealed it was a new mineral, one so rare it barely registered in gemology textbooks. For decades, only a few crystals were known. By the year 2000, there were only 3 documented painite crystals in the entire world. It's a borosilicate mineral packed with rare elements, the kind of chemistry that barely happens in nature. The conflict is quiet but brutal. Most people who love expensive stones will never, in their lifetime, touch a real painite. It exists at the edge of luxury, where money stops mattering and only obsession remains. A painite, if you ever see one, is usually small, darker, almost unassuming. It doesn't glow like a Paraiba. It doesn't shift like an alexandrite. What it does is something far more subtle. It feels like a secret. Holding a painite in your hand feels like touching a piece of silence, a small block of nothing that somehow means everything. Painite is the only gemstone that remembers what it was like to be forgotten.
Paraiba Tourmaline, the gem that looks like someone poured a neon sign into a crystal. It was discovered in the 1980s in the Brazilian state of Paraiba, in a tiny mine that had been considered played out, abandoned. One man, a prospector named Heitor Dimas Barbosa, kept digging where others had walked away. He believed the vein was hiding something new. After years of work, with almost no money left, he finally found the first crystals that glowed electric blue-green, like a bolt of light trapped in stone. The color was so intense, so unnatural-looking, that gemologists initially thought it had to be treated. It wasn't. The saturation came from copper and sometimes manganese in the tourmaline structure. Paraiba is a rare form of elbite, a tourmaline rich in these elements. The result is a color that feels like a live current, a gemstone that looks like it's still charging. Few stones are as small and as valuable. The finest Paraiba tourmalines can cost tens of thousands of dollars per carat, and most are just a few millimeters in size. Wearing a Paraiba feels like carrying a tiny storm. The color hits the light, then explodes, then pulls back, like a single breath held in a piece of crystal. Paraiba Tourmaline is the only gemstone that believes in second chances.
Ruby. The red stone with a name that sounds like it should be on a royal throne. The pigeon's blood rubies, the most coveted by far, trace their status back to Mogok in Myanmar, a valley where kings, merchants, and monks all fought to control the same tiny hills. In the 19th century, British soldiers and colonial traders would trek to Mogok, bribing, negotiating, sometimes outright stealing access to veins that had been mined for centuries. The locals called it the Valley of Rubies, and the battles over it weren't just about profit. They were about identity, land, power. A high-quality ruby is a corundum, aluminum oxide, with a dash of chromium. That trace of chromium forces the stone to drink in light and throw it back in this deep, almost vibrating red. When you see it in natural daylight, it feels like a drop of liquid fire, cooling, but not quite letting go. One of the oldest stories, warriors in some Southeast Asian kingdoms believed that inserting a ruby under the skin, yes, surgically, would make them invincible. They weren't just decorating themselves. They were trying to turn the stone into a kind of armor. A ruby on the finger doesn't feel like jewelry. It feels like a warning, like a small, quiet rebellion. You don't just wear it. You let it watch the room. Rubies are never shy. They are the color of a decision you won't regret.
Sapphire. The stone that looks like the sky decided to become solid. The most famous blue sapphires trace back to a single region in the mountains of Kashmir, where tiny deposits were discovered in the 1880s and almost immediately became legendary. Kashmir sapphires aren't just blue, they are blue velvet. When you see them in natural light, they have a soft velvety glow, like the sky at dusk smudged over a lake. The reason is a natural mix of iron and titanium, plus a slight internal scattering that makes the color feel plush, almost tactile. In the 19th century, Persian sky-gazers believed the color of the sky was caused by a giant sapphire floating above the earth. The myth said that the world was resting on a stone so large, so perfect, that its reflection colored the atmosphere. A huge sapphire in your hand feels heavy, like a cooled piece of metal. It's not just visual weight, there's a psychological density, as if you're holding a fragment of an old sky. Sapphires are the only gemstones that feel like they're judging you. They are the color of a decision you didn't know you had to make.
Tanzanite. The stone that didn't exist in your jewelry dictionaries before 1967. That year, a Maasai herder named Jumane Ngoma walked the scrubland near Mererani, Tanzania, and found crystals that no one could name, a new blue-purple gem in the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro. At first, it was just a curious mineral. Then Tiffany & Co. saw it, fell in love with the color, and realized something rare. Here was a gemstone from a single country, from a single mountain range, from a single source. They renamed it Tanzanite, tying the stone to the country, and launched a marketing campaign that introduced it to the world in the 1970s. Tanzanite is a variety of zoisite. It's famous for pleochroism, the ability to change color depending on the angle of light and the way it's cut. When you turn it in your hand, it can go from deep blue to violet, then almost brick red, like a prism hiding inside a single crystal. A lot of the material is heat-treated to remove brown tones and make the blue-purple more vivid. That's intentional artistry, not a hack. The stone is soft, sensitive, and the human hand has to help it find its final color. In 2002, the American Gem Trade Association officially added Tanzanite to the December birthstone list, a huge honor for a stone that only entered the lexicon a few decades prior. A Tanzanite against the skin feels like a cold flame, a blue so rich it almost burns, but without the weight of a ruby. Tanzanite is the gemstone that remembers what it was like to be unknown.